Hi Blend fans, and welcome to this tutorial on how we make a cube. And this shows off the glass shader, and it also shows off the turntable animation. And this is probably the only ever turntable you're going to ever need in the future. Follow along and hopefully you'll enjoy this tutorial. So what we're going to do is we've got a cube here. And what we'll do is we're going to add in a sphere as well. So I'm just going to go into wireframe mode just so we can see our sphere on the inside of here. I'm just going to add in a mesh, and the mesh is going to be the UV sphere, and just scale it down. Or a ball if you want. Shade smooth. So we've got a ball inside of a cube. Not very interesting, I've got to admit, but we're going to make it look quite cool in our render in Blender. So let's just go into select our cube, and we're just going to actually go into edit mode by pressing the tab key and Control and B, and we're going to add a simple bevel to our cube. First of all, open that if it wasn't open, and we'll change this to 0.01. In fact, now I'll make it 0.1. Make it nice and chunky, and we'll add some segments to this. As many or as little as you want, but I'm just going to add in 6 on this case. Just like that. So we've got a cube with a ball in it, and if we go into render mode, as you can see, it looks like we're in Eevee because there's no distortion. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a few things. Right, cycles, it just does better glass. So we're going to actually go into cycles. If you've got a GPU, enable it here, or enable it in the references if it's grayed out there and you have got a GPU, and that can be done by just going to edit preferences and then enabling your GPU just like I have done here anyway, and then of course save them settings. So as you can see, we're actually in cycles, and it's got denoise here, but we're not going to actually use the denoiser that it sets, so we'll take that out because we're going to use the composite denoiser, which is a lot quicker. Right, we've got the maximum samples at 4096. In a turntable animation, if you set this that high, then you might be waiting days for your render to finish. So we're just going to actually move it to 32 and let this smoothing in the compositor actually sort this out, or the denoiser in the compositor. So we've done that, and to 32 in the actual viewport display as well, because it will seriously make our computer drag if we don't. So we've got this, and what we'll do now is we're going to actually make this cube into glass. So we'll add a shader in here. I don't want this shader, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Put a new shader, and we're going to make this a simple glass. So glass BSDF, like that. And as you can see, we've got our glass with our ball in the middle. It's not very, we can't really see because it's a funny old glass, this one. What we're going to do is actually select our ball in the middle, add a new colour to this, and we'll just have just the principled shader. So I've just added that in there. So now we've got our cube with our ball in it, and we'll actually alter our shader so it mimics a proper glass. So go into shading, like that. Go into the render mode so we can see our glass. And if it's invisible like this, what you can do is scroll your mouse wheel out on there until it appears like that. Move it into the center, and we'll just zoom in on our glass shader. So we've got our glass shader, and these are the actual settings that make an adequate glass that's very reflective. So it's up to you what kind of glass you want, but I'm going to actually set this to 0.01 in the roughness, like that, and I'm just going to change the IOR to 1.45 because I think this just makes a really good glass. And then another thing that actually helps our reflections is a thickness value in here. So we're just going to add in, the way you can do this is just click on the black, press an F3 key, and you can actually type in value. I'll just find it there, and we're going to take the value, put it into the thickness of our glass, so you can actually change the thickness of the glass, which will change the distortion, but I'm just going to set this to 0.01 as well, because that makes quite a good glass. So as you can see, we've got our ball in our glass, and as you can see, we've got quite a lot of reflections there, and that's because I've used an HDRI. So if you go into the World tab, you can add an HDRI into here. Right, I'll just show you how you add it. So what you do is you go into environment, select an environment texture, and then you can open your HDRI from wherever you've put it. This one I got from Polyhaven, and I think it's called the Kaylee HDRI. So let's just find it. HDRI is from Polyhaven, and if I type in C up here, I'm sure it's Kaylee Interior. There we go, and that's the one that I've used for this scene. So that's the HDRI, but as you can see, this here is actually transparent, and the way we actually set the transparency into there is we go into our render, and you've got a thing called film, and it's hidden under there, and if it's not transparent, then you can actually enable transparency. So for this tutorial, if we now render this, as you can see, it just actually renders it with a transparent background, but I want a black background for my image, so I'm just going to add in a black image, and that's where we actually use the compositor and the denoiser in our scene. So I'm going to go into compositing now. What you do is use nodes, and as you can see, this fetches this up. So we've got that, and we're just going to actually set some simple compositing. So what we can do is we're going to first add a denoiser, add filter and denoise, because the denoiser in the compositor is a lot faster. And we can set a few of these. You can have it HDRI and all that kind of thing. But we're also going to actually want a black background. And the way you do this is you add a mix color node. So add in, right, click on the black, press the F3 key, and what I want is a mix color node. So MIX, mix color. And I didn't want it in there because I want it to actually work on these attributes. So as you can see, the actual color there, but you can actually change the color to anything you want, but I'm just going to keep it at black because it works quite well, and you can actually change the intensity of the light like that. So now we've got our cool image. So back into layout, and as you can see, we've got our thing that we want to actually do our animation round. So I'm just going to add in something that our camera can follow. So if we look at our camera and we look where it is, it's over here. But what we're going to do is now zero our camera. So press the N key, we'll open this. Make sure that none of these are selected. Go into the item, and we're just going to zero our camera. The reason we're zeroing our camera is because we're going to make it follow a path. So the camera now is, if we look at it, it's actually in there. So there's our camera, just there. So it's right in the center of our cube, and we're just going to add in a simple curve. And this is going to be a circle. So we add our circle in Bezier curves, like that, and we've got our simple thing for our camera to follow. So select the camera, we'll add a constraint to this, and the object constraint is going to be follow path. So we've got our camera there, but it's not following our path. So we've got our target, which of course is our Bezier circle, and as you can see, it doesn't actually move when we actually press our spacebar, and the reason it hasn't moved is because we haven't animated a path. So animate path, and as you can see, it follows our circle. But as you can see, you've got sort of jump from one side to the other side there that happens at the end, which you wouldn't want it to do because it'd look really odd in your animation. So see, it jumps and jumps back. So selecting, to cure this kind of thing, we actually select the Bezier circle, select the smiley face down here, And we'll scroll down here, and you've got a thing called animation path. And the reason it's doing that is because it's getting to the 100th frame and then jumping. So we know this animation is 250 frames long, so we change that to 250. Like that. So if we actually run our animation again, as you can see, our camera follows our path all the way till the end, and it starts again. So that's your turntable animation. But what we've got here is we've got a camera that's not pointing at our cube. So we add another constraint. So the other constraint, add an object constraint and track 2. And the track 2 here, and you can actually have this track to an empty if you want some strange effects. But in this case, I'm just going to actually have it track to the cube. So it's tracking to the cube now, and if we look through our camera, as you can see, we've got our perfect turntable animation. Now that looks a little bit boring, so what we can do is we can come out of this camera, right, go to our scene again, and because this camera is pointing up there, if we actually move it G and Z up like that, now we're looking from above on our scene, and it will look something like this, which is a little bit more interesting. I think you'd agree. But the Breezer Circle has got one more other trick. Because what you can do is you can animate the actual Breezer Circle so it actually rotates using keyframes. Or you can just put it at an angle. So I'm just going to rotate on the X. Like that. So it's going to now go from underneath and look from the top. So back into the camera. As you can see, it's underneath and it's looking from the top. And then your animation becomes that little bit more interesting yet again. I think this is the only actual turntable you're ever going to need because it's so versatile. Right, another thing that you can do is you can change the shape of this by pressing the tab key on your Breezer Circle, and you can drag points, especially actually if you select proportional editing and G, and you can make it a weird shape if you want, and you can even make it follow a path if it were going in a garden by adding more subdivisions to it. So there we go. So as you can see, it seems to drift in and drift out. The reason it's drifting in and drifting out is because of the shape of our Breezer Circle there. As you can see, it follows out, so it's going far away and then it's getting closer. And if we look through our camera, you can really change the look, the feel of your turntable animation to your heart's content. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, remember, subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and of course leave a comment. The only thing I didn't cover there's always a bit at the end, is now you want to actually render this cool image into an actual render, and this is done quite simply by selecting where you want your animation to be. In this case, it's going to be in the cube folder. I'm going to give it a name of 1.1. Oh, I'll just call it 1 point. Accept that. Now, if you actually got ping set here, it will actually render everything into ping images, which you'll have to stitch together. But on a short animation like this, I just tend to use FFmpeg, which is using the encoder, which actually the H.264 encoder. But if we now render this several hours later or minutes later, if you've got a really fast computer, you should have an animation, and what we need to do is render the animation. So render animation like that, and it will actually draw every single frame until you're left with a quite a cool animation. But this can actually be used to actually show off all sorts of things. So here's a rose I did in a glass cube. Bye for now.